Hello guys, welcome back. This is a collective reading, so take what resonates, but okay, we're starting with the Tower, and this is intense. Look at this card. Two structures, both burning, split by this bolt right down the middle. Psychologically, the Tower is what happens when a story you've been telling yourself can't hold anymore. And I'm getting that somebody has been trying to keep this attraction in a very controlled box. Like, it's just chemistry. I just miss their face. I just miss their touch. I'll get over it. But something in them is cracking. Wait, because the bird falling through the center is really catching me. This feels like the part of them that wanted freedom from these feelings, and yet the more distance they created, the more obvious the attachment became. They may have tried distractions. They may have told themselves you were a temporary obsession. But the fantasy keeps returning, and it's not staying purely physical anymore. They imagine getting close to you, yes. Your hand in theirs. That first look. The tension of being near you again. But then the fantasy keeps going. They picture the conversation after. They picture your voice softening. They picture staying beside you when there's nothing left to perform. That's the Tower moment. Because wanting you was manageable. Missing you emotionally? That wasn't part of their plan. And look at the fire on both sides. It's mirrored. To me, symbolically, that says the conflict isn't simply desire versus restraint. It's mind versus body, safety versus vulnerability. Part of this person wants to run toward the intensity. Another part knows that if they admit what you actually mean to them, their whole emotional structure has to change. And there's something else here. That lightning doesn't end at the top. It travels downward. So this attraction is going deeper. The next card needs to tell us what exactly this Tower is exposing, because I don't think the real shock is how badly they want your touch. I think it's what they feel underneath it. And that realization is frightening them now. And then we get the Ace of Cups. Okay, that makes sense. Because look at this card. There's this huge golden cup in the center, but what catches me first is the heart right in the middle of it. It's glowing. The cup is overflowing. There's water on both sides. And above it, you have this white bird coming down through that beam of light. So this is not giving me, I just want you and I can't stop thinking about your body. The attraction is there. Absolutely. But psychologically, the Ace of Cups is what happens when desire starts opening something emotionally that you weren't prepared to feel. And I think that's what this person is realizing. They may have expected the physical craving to burn itself out. Like maybe if enough time passed, if they stayed busy enough, if they stopped replaying certain moments, eventually the intensity would settle down. But it didn't. Because now when they imagine your touch, the fantasy doesn't stop at the touch. Wait. Because the lotus underneath the cup is important too. It's sitting right there in the water, completely open. That feels like vulnerability. Like this person can imagine being close to you physically, yes, but then something softer happens. They imagine relaxing around you, talking to you, hearing your voice when neither of you is trying to impress the other. For some of you, they miss the way they felt around you more than they expected. Seen? Calmer? Wanted, maybe, but also understood. And that is a very different kind of missing. Look at the water overflowing from the cup. It can't really be contained anymore. That feels connected to the Tower because they've been trying to keep this in one category and it keeps spilling into another one. Physical attraction became emotional comfort, fantasy became attachment, and there's something else here. That rainbow behind the cup makes me feel like their mind is starting to connect you with relief, with the possibility of finally dropping their guard. Which sounds beautiful, but for somebody who survives by staying emotionally controlled, that can feel dangerous. So the next card needs to tell us why being emotionally affected by you scares them more than simply wanting you ever did. And we get the Two of Wands. Okay, this is interesting because look at the image. You have these two wands rising upward, both lit with fire, but they're separated. They start from the same central point and then move in two different directions. That feels exactly like this person's internal split. One part of them wants to move toward you, the other part wants to keep everything contained. And psychologically, the Two of Wands is not really about not knowing what you want. A lot of the time, it's about knowing what you want and realizing that choosing it would change your current reality. That's what feels dangerous here. Physical attraction is easier to explain away. You can call it chemistry, timing, temptation. You can tell yourself, I'm just attracted to them. That's all. But emotional attachment forces a different sentence. This person can affect me, and I don't think they like how true that sentence is becoming. Wait, because there's this whole zodiac wheel underneath the wands, and both of them are coming out of the same star in the center. To me, symbolically, that feels like them analyzing this from every possible angle, trying to find the version of the story that gives them control again. Maybe they create distance. Maybe they stay quiet. Maybe they throw themselves into work, routine, other people, anything that keeps their mind occupied. And then suddenly they're wondering what you're doing. They're imagining your face. They're telling themselves they only miss being close to you, and then somehow the fantasy turns into hearing about your day. Wondering if you're okay. Imagining sitting beside you without even needing anything to happen. That's the contradiction. Because lust can stay in fantasy. Attachment follows you into ordinary moments. And look at the sun above these two wands. There's nowhere for this feeling to hide in the image. Everything is illuminated. So for some of you, I'm getting that this person's real fear may not be, what if they don't want me? It might be the opposite. What if you do? What if they move toward you and realize the connection isn't something they invented in their head? Because rejection would hurt. But mutuality, that would require them to actually do something with all of this. And then we get the devil reversed. Wait, this changes it. Because look at this card. You have these two figures on opposite sides, almost mirrored, and both of them are connected by chains. But because the card came out reversed, psychologically, I'm reading this less as being trapped by the attraction and more as somebody becoming aware of the pattern they've been trapped inside. And that matters. Because if you rejected them, painful as that would be, they would have an answer. They could pull away. They could tell themselves, okay, I imagined too much. I need to let this go. There would be somewhere for all of this intensity to go. But if you feel it too, then they don't get that clean escape. Look at the two figures here. There's space between them, but the connection is still there. And I'm getting that this person may keep imagining the exact moment that space disappears. Not only touching you, you looking back at them. You moving closer instead of away. Maybe saying something that lets them know you remember the tension too. And that is where the fantasy becomes much more confronting because suddenly they're not imagining desire happening to them anymore. They're imagining you participating in it, choosing them. For some of you, that possibility is what keeps bringing this person back into the same mental loop. Because if the attraction is mutual, then they have to decide whether they're actually willing to be emotionally honest. And look at the fire running straight through the center of this card. It connects everything. The physical intensity is right there, but so is the fear of losing control. That's why the reversal is interesting. It feels like they're starting to see that avoiding you hasn't really freed them from anything. If anything, it has made them more aware of how deeply this has gotten under their skin. But there's something else here. This card also feels like an old pattern, almost like part of their reaction to you belongs to something that happened before this connection ever became this intense. So the next card needs to show us whether they're afraid because of something that happened between the two of you, or because you're touching an emotional wound that was already there. And we get Temperance reversed. Okay, this actually explains a lot because look at this card. Even reversed, there's so much about balance in the image. You have this central figure holding two vessels, these huge rainbow-colored wings spreading outward, and then these two winding streams moving away in opposite directions. But reversed, that balance feels disrupted. It's like something happened that taught this person that getting emotionally invested means eventually losing their footing. For some of you, there could be actual history here. Maybe there was a moment between the two of you where something became unclear, somebody pulled back, timing got complicated, or feelings were never fully addressed. But for others, I don't think you created this fear. You activated it. There's a difference. This person may have learned somewhere before you that when they really care, they become vulnerable to disappointment. So when this connection started becoming emotionally important, part of them immediately wanted to regulate it, reduce it, turn it back into something simpler. It's attraction. It's just tension. I'll stop thinking about them eventually. Except they haven't. And wait, because those rainbow wings are really catching me, there's something almost open about them. Unprotected. This feels like you may remind this person of a version of themselves they haven't accessed in a long time. The version that could get excited about someone without immediately calculating the risk. The version that wanted closeness without needing an exit strategy. And that might be why this longing has such a strange, nostalgic quality to it, even if you barely have history together. They may not only miss you, they may miss who they become when they let themselves feel you. That softer part, that hopeful part, that part of them that still wants to believe closeness doesn't always end in disappointment. Now, that does not automatically excuse distance or inconsistency. Their history is still theirs to deal with. But psychologically, it explains why this attraction keeps pulling up more than attraction. And something is changing here because their fantasies don't feel vague anymore. I'm getting that there is an actual moment they keep replaying or mentally constructing. A specific kind of encounter where you're standing close enough that neither of you can pretend the tension isn't there anymore. And the next card needs to show us exactly what happens in that scene they keep rehearsing. And we get the Knight of Wands reversed. Okay, now we're seeing the scene because look at this card. There's so much fire here. The whole image is orange, red, gold. You have this figure moving through all of that heat. But reversed, the energy doesn't feel like straightforward action. It feels contained. Like somebody keeps getting right up to the point of doing something and then pulling themselves back. And I'm getting that this is exactly how the fantasy plays out. They imagine seeing you again. That first second where they notice your face. Maybe there's conversation, maybe there isn't. But there's this moment where both of you become very aware of the space between you. And in their head, they keep shortening that space. You're standing closer. They notice where your eyes go. Their hand brushes yours, or maybe they imagine finally taking your hand instead of wondering what it would feel like. And then there's that pause. Who moves first? That's where the Knight of Wands energy comes in because the desire itself is not subtle. This person may imagine being much more direct than they actually allow themselves to be in real life. But reversed, they hesitate, they replay it, they change the ending. Maybe in one version they say something first. In another, you do. In another, nothing is said at all. You just look at them in a way that tells them they didn't imagine any of this. And wait, because that's actually the important part. It's not the touch that seems to stay with them longest. It's your reaction, your eyes softening, your voice changing. The possibility that instead of pulling away, you let them know they're emotionally welcome there. Because I think these fantasies are doing something for them psychologically. They're trying to answer a question they don't have the courage or maybe the opportunity to ask directly. If I showed you how much this affects me, what would you do? And that makes this much deeper than simple desire, because once they imagine the chemistry being acknowledged, their mind keeps going past it. So now I want to know what they imagine after that moment. Because the next card looks like it's going to tell us what this person actually wants from you once there's nothing left to pretend about. And I don't think it's casual. And we get the Four of Cups. Okay, this is not what I expected after the Knight of Wands. Because look at this card. The energy completely changes. We go from all that fire, movement, tension, wanting to close the distance to somebody sitting completely still. And there are these cups surrounding them. One above, three below. It's almost like the fantasy has moved past the exciting part and into this much quieter question of, okay, but what would it actually feel like to have this person in my life? That's what I'm getting here. Because the Four of Cups can be about emotional withdrawal, yes, but look at how protected this figure feels in the center of the card. The cups are around them. The water is calm. There's no chasing happening. And I think that matters. This person may fantasize about the moment where the chemistry finally gets acknowledged, but then their imagination keeps moving into something surprisingly ordinary. Staying, talking after, sharing food, laughing at something stupid, waking up and still wanting to hear your voice. Knowing they can reach for you without having to wonder what it means every single time. And wait, this is why the Tower came first, because that completely destroys the story that this is only about lust. If all they wanted was one intense moment, they could keep this contained in fantasy. But this card feels like wanting access to your emotional world. Not possession, presence, a place. For some of you, they may imagine what it would feel like to stop guessing where they stand with you, to have some consistency, to know that the softness they imagine between you doesn't disappear the second the tension is over. And that is much more serious than they may have intended this to become. Look at the cup above the figure too. It's almost suspended there, like an emotional possibility they haven't decided whether to reach for. That feels important. Because wanting something real creates a choice. They can stay where they are, protected, quiet, imagining everything. Or they can reach, and reaching would change the relationship permanently. So the next card needs to show us exactly where they are on that threshold now. Are they still choosing safety? Or are they getting closer to the point where not knowing is harder than taking the risk? And we get strength. Okay. This is interesting because this doesn't feel like somebody who has stopped wanting to move. It feels like somebody using a lot of energy not to. Look at this card. You have this woman standing beside the lion and she isn't fighting it. She's not running from it either. Her hand is right there on him, calm, almost gentle, and that feels like the decision point. Because psychologically, strength is not about having no desire. It's about what you do when the desire is powerful enough that you have to consciously manage it. And this person has been managing this. The Tower showed us the structure cracking. The Ace of Cups showed us why. The feeling got emotional. And now Strength is showing me how much effort may be going into appearing unaffected while all of that is happening underneath. They can stay silent, they can keep their distance, they can continue saying, it's just chemistry, I'll get over it. But there's a cost to that now. They keep carrying the unanswered question. They keep imagining what would happen if they saw you again. They keep getting to that moment in their mind where your hand is close, your eyes meet, something could finally be acknowledged, and then reality still gives them no answer. And I'm getting that the uncertainty itself may be becoming more uncomfortable than either outcome, because if they approach you, yes, they risk being exposed. They risk hearing something they don't want to hear. They lose the protection of ambiguity. But they also get truth. Wait, because look at the infinity symbol across this figure's body. That's catching me. It feels like the loop, wanting you, controlling it, missing you, fantasizing, pulling back, then wanting you again. At some point, restraint stops feeling like safety and starts feeling like repetition. And I think something in them is beginning to recognize that. The lion isn't gone. The desire isn't gone, but their relationship to it is changing. They may be realizing they cannot keep separating the physical attraction from everything that comes with it anymore. So the next card needs to show us what shifted, because something has made you much harder for this person to put back into that little box labeled just chemistry. And I think we're about to see exactly why. And then we get the Ace of Wands. Okay, there it is. Because now we have the Ace of Wands after the Ace of Cups. And that pairing is exactly what this whole reading has been building toward. Look at this card. Everything is concentrated around this one wand in the center, and all of that fire is exploding outward from it. Lightning, heat, movement, it's impossible to ignore. That's the physical attraction. That part never went away. But the difference now is that we already saw the Ace of Cups. So psychologically, this isn't desire replacing emotion. It's desire merging with it. And I think that's the shift. This person may have started out imagining the obvious things. Being close to you, finally touching you, seeing what happens when neither of you pulls away. But now the fantasy carries something else underneath it. They don't only imagine getting your attention. They imagine holding your gaze. They don't only imagine that first touch. They imagine not wanting the moment to end afterward. And wait, because look at the way this energy is moving outward from the center. It doesn't stay contained around the wand. That feels important. Because every time they follow the physical attraction in their mind, it keeps opening into something emotional. Your voice, your expression, how you would look at them after the tension finally broke, whether you would stay close, whether they could actually relax with you once there was nothing left to hide. That's why they can't reduce you to a fantasy anymore. The lust is still here, very clearly. But it's carrying tenderness now, longing, recognition, the desire not only to touch you, but to feel known by you. And when I say soul here, I don't mean we need to turn this into some guaranteed cosmic connection. I mean that psychologically, this attraction has started touching something deeper in them than they expected, meaning vulnerability, the feeling that you matter. And that is why this has become so destabilizing, because you can distract yourself from desire. It is much harder to distract yourself from someone who has started to represent emotional closeness. So there's one final thing we need to understand, not what you should wait for, not what this person might eventually do, but what all of this actually means for you emotionally. Because their feelings are one side of this reading. Your position in it is the part we still need to see, and we get the Queen of Pentacles. Okay, this is your position. Look at this card. She's sitting right in the middle of all this growth, all these flowers, all this abundance, and she's holding the pentacles calmly in her hands. She's not reaching. She's not chasing anything. She's not trying to convince anyone of her value. And I think that matters after everything we just saw. Because whatever this person is feeling privately, you are not being asked to carry the emotional weight of their realization for them. You don't have to become more desirable. You don't have to perform harder. You don't have to somehow prove that the connection is safe enough for them to finally admit what they feel. The Queen of Pentacles knows what she brings, and for some of you, that may actually be part of why this person is so affected. There's something about your energy in this reading that feels grounding. Like the attraction is intense, yes, but you also represent something real enough that they can't keep treating this like a passing fantasy. And look at the garden around her. Everything here has roots. That takes me all the way back to the tower, because what was collapsing wasn't necessarily the connection. It was the story they were using to keep the connection manageable. It's just chemistry. It's just physical. I'll get over it. But distance exposed attachment. Attachment exposed vulnerability. The fantasy moved past your body and into your voice, your presence, your reactions, what it might feel like to actually have you there. And then the Ace of Wands came out beside all that cup energy. That was the merge. Desire and emotion becoming harder to separate. So when your touch keeps showing up symbolically in this reading, I don't think it only means physical contact. Your touch represents the point where this stops being theoretical for them. The moment desire becomes emotional reality, and that is theirs to deal with. Because feelings can be intense, fantasy can be intense, missing somebody can be intense, but none of those things replace action. So you can let this reading confirm that for whoever this resonates with, there may be much more underneath the attraction than they've been willing to admit. But what happens next? That has to be shown. Not imagined, not rehearsed, chosen.